The moment Alpha King Eirik Wolfbane dismounted from his midnight stallion, he felt that something was wrong. Fenris, his beta wolf companion, wasn't acting normal. The silver-furred wolf's ears shot up, his body stiffening as if he had sensed something no ancient werewolf could perceive. And then, without warning, he began howling frantically, pulling against Eirik's mental command as if trying to break free from their bond. "Fenris, what is it?" Eirik demanded, confused, but Fenris didn't respond. Before the Alpha King could react, Fenris broke formation and sprinted toward the forbidden sacrifice stones, howling louder and more desperately with every stride. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Eirik followed, still confused, until he heard it, a scream, high-pitched, terrified a child. His blood ran cold. Fenris was already ahead, howling furiously as if trying to warn him about something no werewolf could see. And then Eirik froze. A little girl, no older than 6, was bound to the ancient blood-stained altar, crying, shaking, unable to move. And around her, glowing brighter with every passing second, dark ritual symbols pulsed with malevolent crimson energy accelerating toward completion. Eirik roared for his pack guards. But Fenris didn't wait. He shot forward like lightning, racing toward the girl with desperate urgency. "Why is she here?" Eirik whispered, his voice thick with horror. Who would dare break the sacred laws? And how did Fenris sense her from so far away through the enchanted forest? The truth behind who put her there would shake the very foundation of the werewolf kingdom. Stay with us, because this incredible story will leave you absolutely shocked.
Before we continue with this shocking rescue, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because stories like this don't come around every day. Seriously, if you love intense, supernatural thrillers, you can't miss what happens next. Also, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story reaches. Now, let's get back to Eirik's desperate fight to save Lyra's life.
The full moon had barely risen when Alpha King Eirik Wolfbane began his patrol through Shadowpine Forest. Eirik's boots hit the ancient stone path at full speed, his heart hammering against his ribs as he followed Fenris through the twisted shadows of Shadowpine Forest. The wolf was moving faster than he'd ever seen, weaving between moss-covered trees with supernatural urgency. And then they broke through the tree line, and Eirik's world stopped. The sacrifice stones rose before them like broken teeth against the moonlit sky, and there, at the center of the blood-stained altar, was the girl. She couldn't have been older than 6, her small body bound by silver chains that glowed with an unnatural light. Her face was streaked with tears, her mouth open in silent terror as she stared up at the symbols carved into the stones around her. But it was those symbols that made Eirik's blood freeze. They were glowing, pulsing with crimson energy that grew brighter with each passing heartbeat. He recognized them immediately, ancient runes of blood magic, forbidden for over 3 centuries. And they were accelerating, feeding off the child's fear, her life force being drained with every second that passed. "No," Eirik breathed, his voice barely a whisper. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not in his territory. The girl's eyes found his, wide and desperate, and she tried to scream but only managed a broken sob. The chains burned against her wrists, leaving angry red marks that sizzled with dark magic. Fenris howled, a sound that echoed through the forest like a war cry, and Eirik moved. He leaped onto the altar, his body already shifting, bones cracking and reforming as his hands became claws. The ritual symbols flared brighter, sensing the interruption, trying to complete their deadly work before he could reach her. "Hold on!" Eirik roared, his voice deepening with the transformation. His claws tore into the first chain, sparks of dark magic exploding against his skin, burning like acid. He gritted his teeth against the pain and kept going, ripping through the enchanted silver with raw alpha power. The symbols were blazing now, the entire altar vibrating with malevolent energy. The girl screamed as the magic surged, trying to claim her before the ritual could be stopped. Eirik grabbed the final chain and pulled with everything he had. The chain snapped, and the world exploded. A shockwave of dark energy erupted from the altar, throwing Eirik and the girl backwards through the air. He twisted mid-flight, wrapping his body around her as they crashed into the forest floor, rolling down the embankment in a tangle of limbs and dirt. The explosion roared above them, crimson lightning crackling across the stones before imploding in on itself with a sound like thunder. Then silence. Just the girl's ragged breathing and Fenris's protective growl standing over them both. Eirik's hands were still shaking as he gently checked the girl for injuries. She was alive, breathing, but her small body trembled violently against his chest. The silver chain burns on her wrists glowed faintly in the moonlight, still pulsing with residual dark magic that made his skin crawl. "You're safe now," he whispered, trying to keep his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. "What's your name?" "Shifa." "Lyra," the girl managed between sobs, her voice barely audible. "Lyra Ashwood." Eirik's mind raced. Ashwood. A human family from the border village. Well-respected merchants who traded peacefully with his pack. How had she ended up here, bound to the forbidden altar like some sacrifice from the Dark Ages? "Lyra, who did this to you?" he asked carefully, wiping dirt from her tear-streaked face. "Who brought you here?" The girl's eyes went wide with terror, and she clutched at his leather armor with desperate fingers. "The shadow cloaks," she whispered, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Men in dark robes with hoods covering their faces. They took me from my bed 3 nights ago. They said the moon would drink my blood and make them powerful. They said I was chosen." Eirik felt his stomach turn. The shadow cloaks. He'd heard whispers of them in recent months, rumors of a cult operating in the shadows. But he'd dismissed them as tavern gossip and paranoid fantasies. "There's something else," Lyra continued, her voice shaking. "They left something. An amulet. They buried it beneath the altar stones. They said if anyone found it, the Shadow King would return for it." Before Eirik could respond, Fenris suddenly went rigid beside them, his silver fur standing on end. A low, threatening growl rumbled from deep in his chest, and his amber eyes fixed on the tree line beyond the sacrifice stones. Eirik's head snapped up, his enhanced senses scanning the enchanted woods. And then he saw them. Shadows moving between the ancient trees, too deliberate to be natural, too still to be animals. Hooded figures watching from the darkness, at least 3 of them, maybe more. "They're still here," Lyra whimpered, pressing herself against Eirik. "They never left. They were watching the whole time." Eirik's blood ran cold. They'd been watching him save her, watching the ritual fail, which meant this wasn't over. This wasn't some random act of violence. This was planned, calculated, and whoever these shadow cloaks were, they wanted him to know they were still out there. Fenris's growl intensified, his muscles coiled and ready to attack. The shadows in the tree line shifted, and then, like smoke dissolving in wind, they were gone, vanished into the darkness, as if they'd never been there at all. But Eirik knew better. They were out there, waiting, and whatever they had planned, saving Lyra was only the beginning. Eirik was about to call for his pack guards through their mental link when the ground beneath them began to tremble. At first, it was subtle, barely noticeable, but within seconds the trembling became violent, shaking that rattled his bones. "No, no, no," Lyra gasped, her fingers digging into his arm. "It's happening again. They said the ritual had 2 parts. They said even if the first failed, the second would finish what they started." Eirik's eyes shot to the altar stones behind them, and his heart stopped. New runes were appearing, crawling across the ancient rock like living things, glowing with the same malevolent crimson light. These weren't the symbols from before. These were hidden deeper, carved into the foundation itself. dormant for who knew how long until awakened by the girl's presence. The magic was trying to reclaim its sacrifice. Eirik reached out through his mental link, desperately calling for his guards, for anyone from his pack who could help. But there was nothing. Just static, like something was jamming the connection, cutting him off from his people. They were alone. "Fenris!" Eirik shouted, pulling Lyra behind him as the runes blazed brighter. The altar stones began to hum with power, and dark tendrils of energy started snaking toward them across the ground, seeking the girl like hungry serpents. Fenris moved instantly, positioning himself between the magic and Lyra, his body beginning to glow with an ancient silver light. It was old wolf magic, the kind that ran in the bloodlines of the first werewolves, magic that most had forgotten even existed. But it wasn't enough. The dark tendrils were too strong, too hungry. They lunged forward, and Eirik made his choice. His body erupted in transformation, bones cracking and reshaping as he shifted into his half-wolf form. He threw himself over Lyra, using his own body as a shield as the tendrils struck him like whips of burning ice. The pain was excruciating. Every nerve in his body screamed as the dark magic tried to bore through him, tried to reach the child beneath. Eirik roared, his claws digging into the earth, fighting to hold his position even as the magic threatened to tear him apart. Fenris howled, a sound that echoed with supernatural power. And suddenly, the silver light exploding from his body intensified. It spread outward like a wave, crashing against the dark magic with the force of an avalanche. The two energies collided in midair, crimson and silver battling for dominance. Through gritted teeth, Eirik added his own alpha power to Fenris's magic, channeling everything he had into the counterspell. His vision blurred, his muscles screamed, but he held on. And then, with a sound like breaking glass, the dark magic shattered. The runes beneath the stones went dark, smoking and cracked. The trembling stopped. Eirik collapsed, his transformation reversing as exhaustion overwhelmed him. Lyra was sobbing beneath him, but she was alive. They were both alive. "The masks," Lyra whispered suddenly, her voice hollow with shock. "The shadow cloak's masks. I saw the symbols on them. They were pack symbols. Your pack symbols." Eirik's mind was still reeling from Lyra's revelation about the pack symbols when Fenris suddenly broke away from them, moving back toward the altar with determined purpose. The wolf's nose was pressed to the ground, following some invisible trail that only he could detect. "Fenris, what are you doing?" Eirik called out, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. But the wolf didn't stop. He circled the base of the altar stones twice before stopping at a seemingly ordinary patch of ground. Then he began pawing at the earth, digging frantically at loose stones that had been carefully arranged to look natural. Eirik pushed himself to his feet, every muscle protesting, and moved to where Fenris was digging. "What did you find, boy?" The wolf's claws scraped against something solid, and with one final pull, he uncovered a small hidden compartment carved into the altar's foundation. Inside, wrapped in black cloth, was an obsidian pendant on a silver chain. The moment Eirik's fingers touched it, he knew something was terribly wrong. The amulet was cold, unnaturally so, and it pulsed with a sickening rhythm like a dying heartbeat. But worse than that were the sounds, faint at first but growing louder, screaming. Children's voices screaming in silent agony, trapped inside the black stone. "Dear gods," Eirik whispered, nearly dropping the cursed object. His hands trembled as he held it up to the moonlight. Inside the obsidian, he could see movement, shadows writhing and clawing as if trying to escape. Soul fragments. Multiple soul fragments captured and bound within the pendant. "Blood magic," he breathed, the full horror of what he was witnessing crashing over him. Someone's collecting children's life essence. This isn't just about one ritual. This is systematic, organized. "No," Lyra screamed behind him, her voice breaking with terror. "You found it. You weren't supposed to find it. They said if anyone found the stone, the Shadow King would return for it." Eirik spun around to reassure her, but the words died in his throat. Fenris was growling again, his eyes fixed on the ancient temple ruins that stood in the distance beyond the altar. And there, barely visible in the shadows between crumbling pillars, was a figure, tall, motionless, watching them. Someone had been there the entire time, watching, waiting. "Show yourself!" Eirik roared, his alpha power reverberating through the forest. But the figure didn't move. It simply stood there, a darker shadow among shadows, and even from this distance, Eirik could feel its malevolent presence like ice against his skin. The figure tilted its head slowly, deliberately, as if studying them. Then, without warning, it stepped backward into the ruins and vanished. But the message was clear. They knew Eirik had the amulet. They knew he'd saved the girl, and they were watching his every move.
Wait, did you catch that? The conspiracy goes deeper than we thought. Here's what I want to know. Who do you think is the traitor on the Alpha Council? Drop your theory in the comments right now, and make sure you're subscribed because this story is about to get even more twisted. Don't be that person who misses the ending. Subscribe now and let's figure this out together.
Eirik knew he should wait for backup, should return to the pack's stronghold with Lyra and the cursed amulet. But whoever had been watching them was still out there, and if there was any evidence in those ruins, it could be destroyed before his guards arrived. He made his decision. "Stay close to me," he told Lyra, tucking the amulet carefully into his leather pouch. "Fenris, lead the way." The wolf moved cautiously toward the temple ruins, his silver fur catching the moonlight as he navigated through fallen columns and crumbling archways. The structure was ancient, predating even the werewolf kingdom itself, built by civilizations long forgotten. It should have been empty, abandoned for centuries. But Fenris stopped at a section of wall that looked no different from any other, and began pouring at a specific stone. Eirik ran his hands over the surface, feeling for any irregularity, and then his fingers caught on something, a hidden mechanism. He pressed, and with a grinding sound that echoed through the ruins, a section of wall slowly swung inward. Beyond was a chamber, and it was very much in use. Torches lined the walls, their flames casting dancing shadows across a space that had been converted into some kind of war room. Eirik's breath caught in his throat as he stepped inside, his eyes trying to process everything at once. A large wooden table dominated the center, covered with maps. Not just any maps, but detailed territorial charts of his packlands, marked with routes, patrol patterns, and vulnerabilities. Red symbols indicated key locations, the sacrifice stones among them, along with several others throughout the forest. But it was the wall behind the table that made Eirik's blood run cold. Drawings, dozens of them, sketches of children, and there, among them, was Lyra. Her face captured in charcoal, along with notes about her family, her routine, where she slept. She'd been watched for weeks, maybe months. And beside her image were 4 other children, each with similar notes, each marked with a crimson X. 5 souls to break the treaty, Lyra whispered, reading the words carved into the stone wall in ancient wolf tongue, the letters etched deep and stained dark with what looked like dried blood. 5 children, 5 sacrifices, and Lyra was meant to be one of them. Eirik moved closer to the maps, his mind racing. This wasn't random violence, this was an invasion plan. The ritual sites weren't just for sacrifices, they were strategic locations along the border between werewolf and human territories. If someone completed these rituals, if they managed to break the ancient treaty through blood magic, it would mean war. Fenris suddenly went rigid, a low howl rising from his throat. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving through the ruins toward them. They weren't alone anymore. "We need to leave," Eirik growled, grabbing one of the maps. "Now." Eirik scooped Lyra into his arms and bolted from the chamber with Fenris at his heels. The footsteps were getting closer, echoing through the stone corridors with deliberate purpose. He burst through the temple entrance and ran into the forest, branches whipping past as he navigated the twisted paths between ancient trees. Behind them, he heard shouts. Multiple voices coordinating. Hunting. They'd been expected. Fenris suddenly veered left, leading them deeper into the enchanted woods, where the trees grew so thick that moonlight barely penetrated. Eirik followed without question, trusting his companion's instincts. They ran for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, until the sounds of pursuit began to fade. Then Fenris stopped abruptly, his ears swiveling forward. Someone was ahead of them, moving through the underbrush. A single figure in a dark robe, running as if fleeing from the same pursuers. "Fenris, take him down," Eirik commanded. The wolf exploded forward like a silver arrow, covering the distance in seconds. The robed figure tried to dodge behind an overturned standing stone, but Fenris was too fast. He leaped, his jaws catching the edge of the robe and dragging the man to the ground with a startled cry. Eirik was on him in an instant, one hand at the man's throat, claws extended. "Who are you? Who sent you?" "Please," the man gasped, his hood falling back to reveal a face lined with exhaustion and terror. He was older, maybe 50, with the distinctive silver-threaded robes of the Mage Council beneath his dark outer cloak. "Please, I'm not your enemy. You're a sorcerer," Eirik growled, recognizing the ceremonial markings on the man's inner robe. "One of the shadow cloaks." "No. Yes. I mean," the man's words tumbled out in panic. "My name is Aldrich Moonfell. I've been missing from the Mage Council for 3 months. They took me. They have my family imprisoned in the catacombs beneath the temple. My wife, my daughter. They said if I didn't help them with the ritual, they'd kill them both." Eirik's grip tightened. "You helped them tie a child to the sacrifice stones." "I had no choice." Tears streamed down Aldrich's face. "They forced me to set up the ritual circles, to enchant the chains. But I sabotaged it. I weakened the binding spells. I knew someone would find her before it was complete. I was trying to save her and my family." "Who are they?" Eirik demanded. "The Shadow Cloaks, rogue werewolves from your own packs, working with dark sorcerers who want to void the treaty. They're planning to frame humans for the missing children, to incite war between our peoples." Aldrich's hand trembled as he reached into his robe. "I stole this. Proof of who's behind it." He pulled out a small obsidian crystal, perfectly cut and polished. Even in the darkness, Eirik could see the symbol etched into its surface. His blood turned to ice. It was the sacred marking of the Alpha Council, the seal used only by the highest-ranking members of pack leadership. "That's impossible," Eirik whispered. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't. The pack symbols on the masks, the detailed knowledge of patrol routes, the access to forbidden ritual sites. Someone in his own council was the traitor. "They're using the catacombs," Aldrich gasped. 4 more children are down there right now, being prepared for the final ritual. If they complete all 5 sacrifices by the next full moon, the treaty magic will shatter. And your council member will have the power to crown himself the new Shadow King. Eirik released Aldrich and pulled him to his feet. "Take us to the catacombs, now." The sorcerer nodded frantically and led them deeper into the forest, toward the oldest part of the temple ruins where a stone bridge spanned a deep ravine. The bridge was ancient, barely holding together, its surface cracked and overgrown with moss. But it was the only way to reach the hidden entrance on the other side. They were halfway across when the figures appeared. 3 of them, emerging from the shadows at the far end of the bridge. Tall, imposing, wrapped in the dark robes and silver-masked faces of the Shadow Cloaks. And between them, held roughly by enchanted chains, was a girl no older than 12. Her face was streaked with tears, her mouth gagged. "Father," The muffled scream came from behind the gag as the girl recognized Aldrich. Elara. Aldrich lunged forward, but Eirik grabbed him, holding him back. The center shadow cloak raised a ritual dagger, its blade gleaming with dark runes. He pressed it against the girl's throat, and his voice, when he spoke, was cold and mocking. Alpha King Wolfbane. How convenient of you to bring us the sorcerer who's been causing problems, and the first sacrifice who escaped. This works out perfectly. Let the girl go, Eirik commanded, his voice resonating with alpha power. This ends now. Oh. It's ending, the shadow cloak said, tilting his masked face. But not the way you think. The treaty won't be the only ancient bond broken tonight. Your precious pack unity will shatter when you see who's really been leading this. Release her, Aldrich screamed, his hands crackling with magical energy. The shadow cloak laughed and raised the dagger higher. 5 souls to break the treaty. She'll be number 2. That's when Fenris moved. The wolf didn't hesitate. Didn't wait for a command. He launched himself across the remaining distance of the bridge in a blur of silver fur and snarling fury. The shadow cloaks weren't expecting it. Fenris hit the one holding the dagger with the full force of his body, jaws clamping down on the arm holding the blade. The dagger flew from his grip, tumbling over the edge of the bridge and disappearing into the ravine below with a distant clatter. Fenris, get the girl, Eirik roared, already charging forward. The bridge groaned beneath the sudden violence. Stones cracked and shifted as the 3 shadow cloaks engaged. The one on the left threw a blast of dark magic at Fenris. But the wolf dodged, his supernatural speed making him nearly impossible to hit. The girl fell to the ground as her captor released her to defend himself. Eirik crashed into the center shadow cloak with bone-crushing force, both of them slamming into the bridge's stone railing. It crumbled under their weight, chunks of ancient stone falling into the darkness below. The shadow cloak was strong, unnaturally so, enhanced by dark magic. They grappled, each trying to throw the other over the edge. Aldrich rushed past them, gathering his daughter in his arms and pulling her back toward safety. Elara, I've got you. I've got you. The 3rd shadow cloak moved to intercept them. But Fenris was faster. He leaped onto the cultist's back, dragging him down. The bridge shuddered violently, more stones breaking away. Enough, Eirik roared, channeling his full alpha power. His hand shot out and ripped the mask from the shadow cloak's face. He stumbled backward in shock. It was Gareth Ironpaw, his own pack's second beta, a warrior he'd fought beside for 20 years. And as Fenris and the crumbling bridge brought down the other 2, their masks torn away, Eirik recognized them too. Both pack members. Both sworn to protect. All traitors. They dragged the 3 traitors off the crumbling bridge and bound them with chains that Aldrich hastily enchanted. Gareth spat blood from his split lip and glared up at Eirik with pure hatred burning in his eyes. You're a fool, Wolfbane, Gareth snarled. A weak, pathetic fool who bows to humans like there are equals. Eirik grabbed him by the throat and slammed him against a standing stone. Tell me why. Tell me why you'd betray your own pack. Why you'd sacrifice innocent children. Because war will restore werewolves to their rightful dominance, Gareth roared, struggling against his bonds. For 300 years we've been shackled by that cursed treaty, forced to pretend we're partners with prey. We're apex predators, not diplomats. So you plan to frame humans for the kidnappings? Eirik said, the full scope of the conspiracy crystallizing in his mind. Make it look like they broke the treaty first. Incite our packs to violence. One of the other captured cultists, a scout named Theron, laughed bitterly. It was already working. 5 children missing from border villages, human and werewolf alike. Each disappearance blamed on the other side, tensions rising. By the time we completed the final ritual, both sides would be screaming for blood. And you'd have your war, Eirik finished, disgusted. How many more? How many children do you have? Gareth's smile was chilling. Enough. Aldrich stepped forward, his voice shaking with rage and desperation. The catacombs beneath the temple. That's where they're keeping them. 4 more children. All prepared for the mass sacrifice ritual. They were using them as collateral for dark magic, binding their life force to power the spell that would shatter the treaty. Lyra was going to be the final one, Theron added mockingly. The 5th soul, the completing piece. But your pet wolf ruined that, didn't you, beast? Fenris growled, his silver fur bristling, and Eirik had to restrain him. Where's the entrance? You'll never find it in time. Gareth sneered. The ritual begins at moonset. That gives you less than an hour. And even if you do find them, you'll have to get past. He cut off abruptly, his eyes going wide with fear as he realized he'd said too much. Past what? Eirik demanded. Past who? But before Gareth could answer, Fenris suddenly broke away, sprinting toward a section of the temple ruins that looked completely undisturbed. The wolf began digging frantically at the base of a collapsed wall, his claws scraping against stone and dirt. Eirik followed, his heart pounding. Fenris never acted without reason. If he was digging there, he'd found something. No, Gareth screamed behind them. Stop him! But it was too late. Fenris's claws struck something hollow, and with one powerful pull, he revealed a hidden steel hatch covered in ritual symbols. It was sealed with dark magic, the same malevolent energy that had pulsed from the sacrifice stones. Aldrich rushed over, his hands already glowing with counter-magic. This is it. The entrance to the catacombs. But the seal, it's strong. Very strong. Someone powerful cast this. Can you break it? Eirik asked urgently. The sorcerer nodded grimly. Yes, but whoever's down there will know the moment I do. You'll lose any element of surprise. Eirik drew his blade, its silver edge catching the fading moonlight. Behind him, Lyra clutched Aldrich's daughter, both girls watching with terrified hope. Break it, Eirik commanded. Those children have been down there long enough. Aldrich's hands blazed with brilliant white light as he worked the counterspell, his voice chanting in the old language of magic. The dark symbols on the hatch writhed and fought back. But slowly, inevitably, they began to crack and fade. With a sound like breaking glass, the seal shattered. The hatch flew open, releasing a rush of cold, stale air that reeked of damp stone and something darker. Fear. Eirik could smell the terror that had soaked into those walls. Stay with the girls, Eirik told Aldrich, then turned to Fenris. With me, our brother. They descended stone steps worn smooth by centuries. The passage so narrow, Eirik had to turn sideways in places. Torches flickered in wall sconces, casting dancing shadows that made every corner a potential threat. The deeper they went, the colder it became, until their breath misted in the air. The passage opened into a larger chamber, and what Eirik saw made his heart clench. 4 ritual circles carved into the floor, each one occupied by a child bound with the same silver chains that had held Lyra. 3 boys and a girl, ranging in age from maybe 5 to 10 years old. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow with days of captivity and terror. But they were alive. It's all right, Eirik said softly, sheathing his blade and raising his hands to show he meant no harm. I'm Alpha King Eirik Wolfbane. I'm here to take you home. The oldest boy, his face streaked with dirt and tears, stared at Eirik with desperate hope. We heard the wolves howling up above. We thought the monsters had won. We thought no one would ever find us. The only monsters here were the ones who took you, Eirik said, his voice gentle as he began breaking the enchanted chains. And they're never going to hurt anyone again. Fenris moved from child to child, letting them touch his silver fur, his presence calming their terror. The wolf had saved them all, and somehow they seemed to know it. Within minutes, Eirik had them all free. He carried the youngest, a small girl who couldn't stop shaking, while the others followed close behind. The climb back up the narrow passage was slow, careful, but finally they emerged into the cool night air. What waited for them took Eirik's breath away. His pack guards had finally arrived. Along with representatives from the Mage Council and families from the border villages. Word had spread through the mental link once Eirik's connection was restored. And there, among the crowd, were the parents of the missing children, their faces transforming from anguish to overwhelming joy as they saw their babies alive. The reunions were chaotic, beautiful, and heartbreaking all at once. Mothers sobbing as they clutched children they'd thought were lost forever. Fathers dropping to their knees in gratitude. Siblings rushing forward with cries of relief. Lyra broke away from Elara and ran to Fenris, throwing her small arms around the wolf's neck. Fenris stood perfectly still, letting her hold him as tears streamed down her face. "You didn't just save me," she whispered into his fur. "You saved all of us. You saved the peace." As the moon began to set and the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, Eirik stood with Fenris on a hill overlooking the reunited families. His loyal pack members surrounded the captured traitors, ensuring justice would be served. The treaty would hold. The conspiracy was broken. And somewhere in the forest, his pack began to howl. A sound of triumph, of unity, of honor restored. Fenris lifted his head and joined them, his voice rising above all others. They had won. Not through war, but through courage, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between an Alpha King and his wolf companion who saw what others could not. The Shadow Cloaks were defeated, the children were home, and the peace would endure.
What an incredible journey. But here's my question for you. Do you think Fenris knew from the very beginning that pack members were involved, or was he just following instinct? Tell me what you think in the comments. And if this story moved you, if you felt the tension, the betrayal, and the triumph, then you absolutely need to subscribe. Hit that button right now because I've got more stories like this coming, and trust me, you don't want to miss a single one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.